Good afternoon, Xavier Basketball fans. Here we are with your Razor cast. That's Reaker and Zink. Jim Reaker and Jeff Zink here on Xavier Men's Basketball during this holiday season. Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Hanukkah to all the folks out there. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. You know, we're getting close to that big day. Got a little bit of shopping to do this afternoon. Of course, I didn't do a whole lot to begin with. Actually, I haven't done any to begin with. But I will get my at least half day in today. Finish up a few things that I need to, and looking forward to the conference schedule. The Big East is going to get revved up here real quick for the Musketeers.
Going to get serious, that's for sure, and that's what we got on tap for today. We'll be getting to Jim walking us through the conference top to bottom, but first let's talk about the games they had this past week. One that was a bit of a tickler and one that was a bit of a walk in the park. Which you want to go to first?
Well, let's talk about it. We'll take them in order. The Wake game on Saturday, the Skip Prosser Classic. Again, a great tribute to a great man. We talked a lot about him last week. But the game, Musketeers win it in a close game. They finished it out, and that's the positive thing is even when they're not playing well, they're finding ways to win games against quality opponents. I believe Wake Forest might be the top ranked team that they've played, not in the top 25, but, when they rank them overall, I think they were rated in the top 50. So that was a big win for them. Again, they didn't play real well. In fact, there's a word that I will use to describe this game, and that would be sloppy. The Musketeers were very, very sloppy, had 15 turnovers, shooting 67% free throws. Those two big problems we've talked about from day one when the Musketeers started playing that keep cropped up again on Saturday. Now, the excuse maybe, if there is a good excuse, and Coach Mack talked a little bit about this after the game, was it was exam week. They didn't practice as much as they normally would. Things were kind of broken up. Players would get in and do work on their own when they could, but maybe the team not being together as much as they normally would in a week during the season may have led to that. Did you watch the game on TV? Did you get a chance to get into that? I know some other big games were going on.
Yeah, I watched it, and I would use the word that you used. It was sloppy. It just wasn't a typical team. Also, we talked about it last week. We're playing an ACC team, a tough rival, even though they haven't done well. Danny Manning's down there in his third season, and finally getting his style of people on the court. So I'd even watch out for Wake Forest as they move through the season. They could end up even higher ranked than 50.
Another point that Coach Mack was very adamant in his press conference right after the game was he was very upset in the fact that his bench gave him nothing. And you've talked about that before, how Edmund Sumner and Trayvon Blewett are putting in a lot of minutes. And he made the point, he said, my bench gave me nothing tonight, and I got to get something out of them before we get into the Big East or we're in trouble. And he called out Kaiser Gates and also Quentin Gooden that they just didn't play. And in fact, he said what happened in this game is we'd get a 7 to 9 point lead on the Demon Deacons, and I would put those guys in, and it would evaporate, and I'd have to get my starters back out there to gain control of the game. And so he was very, very disappointed. One other very positive of this was we talked about John Collins, their big 6'10" power forward who was averaging a double-double. And he did get a double-double, 12 points, 12 rebounds, but that was on 6 of 19 shooting. So they really did hold him down, and a lot of that had to be attributed to Gaston underneath. Rashid did a very, very good job playing defense, not giving him any real easy baskets, because if he goes off and gets his normal, I think he was averaging 18, Musketeers maybe don't win that game.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. It's a tough thing. They're gonna have to figure this out going into the tough Big East schedule that we'll talk about in a little bit. But playing 3-4 guys 30 minutes a game just isn't going to work. Now, he was able to shift that around a little bit at the Eastern Washington game. A much easier game, though. They won by almost 30 points. I'm sure you were down there. So tell us what you saw that was a little different in that game.
Well, if you watch that game, they were actually down at one point. I believe the score was 22-11. with about 11 minutes left in the first half. And he explained, Coach Mack, took a little bit of the responsibility for that. They played a different type of offense where they had one guy who kind of controls the ball all the time, and then they go what he called it a 4 flat, where they all are down on the baseline, and they let this guy kind of drive and dish it off, and that's kind of their offense. And they had decided that they were going to give a lot of they're going to play their defense a little bit differently and give them a little more help on him. And they started doing that early, and he kept finding the guy that they were helping off of, and these guys could score. And he finally said they basically just decided to go back to the way that they traditionally play defense, and things flowed a lot better from that point on. They went on, I've seen a couple, I'm not quite sure, I didn't look at it, but I think they went on like a 22-2 run, or at one point somebody had a 35-5 run, and basically put the game away. By halftime they were up by 16 points. Of course, a lot of that was the big three-point shooters, Blewett, Sumner, and Makura all were just on fire. Being home at the Cintas Center, I think, helped that. So, but yeah, then they did get a lot better help off the bench. Kaiser Gates played 23 minutes in that game, put up 12 points. He was 4 for 7 from the three-point line. Gooden had 6 assists, and he was on the floor for 18 minutes. And even Sean O'Mara, who hasn't seen the floor a lot, got in 13 minutes. So those problems that he talked about and we just talked about in that Wake Forest game seem to be coming around to the positive a little bit. Again, it wasn't quite the opponent that they've been playing. And actually the free throw shooting was 75%. That's a little bit better. Again, that's a problem that they need to work on, although
no pressure in the game either, so that's
yeah, exactly. Makura was 8 for 8 from the free throw line. That's where he got most of his points, and it was good to see him driving to the basket and getting fouled, and rather than standing back and take some jump shots, because sometimes when he's not hitting his jump shot, he just keeps shooting it instead of trying to take it to the rack. So it's kind of nice to see that.
Well, we've talked about, in some ways that could be helped. Some of those, and this will be sort of week 3 of a Miles Davis update. Coach Mack did come out and say that Miles is coming back, but he's rather mysterious about it. What are you hearing?
Yeah, he I think it was Shannon Russell, who covers the Musketeers a lot. She just asked him point blank, is Miles Davis coming back? And he said, yes, he is. And said, can you tell us when? And he said, soon. And she said, do you know exactly when he's coming back? And Coach Mack says, yes, I do, and I'm not going to tell you. So that was Coach Mack has gotten very good at his press conferences. We kind of start to see his personality a little bit now in his 7th season. He's kind of loosened up a little bit and takes a little humor in things. He said he didn't want to tip off the opponents when Miles coming back. I think it's probably, if you look at it, I could see him coming back when everybody else comes back from Christmas. I mean, that just makes sense. They're all going to go home for Christmas. Again, some of them have to travel quite a distance. I could see him, because he said close to, Big East time, and Big East time is going to be right after Christmas on December 28th when they have the Friars in town from Providence. So that's my take on it right now.
That is true. Yeah, that's a nice segue right into it. Like I say, yeah, they do get Providence starting off. That's the only game that's coming up this week in the Cintas Center at December 28th before we talk again. We'll just talk briefly about that because I know you got a lot to tell us about the Big East, but the Providence team, and we'll let you tell it in your rundown. But they're 10-2 with losses to OSU and Virginia, but they've only played one game, and that was that loss to OSU. No real quality wins, but always a tough squad, and we'll let you talk about them as we go into the Big East preview. And it's always a tough conference. Already 14 games against top 25 teams in the pre-conference season, and they're 9-5, and only St. John's has a losing record at 6-7, but they just thumped Syracuse at home, and I don't know if that says that St. John's getting better or Syracuse is just going to be bad this year, but maybe Chris Mullen has got the Red Storm ready to play his style of basketball. But we're going to take it, by your request, kind of from a worst to first standpoint. So why don't we go, our top 10 teams in the Big East, and we'll start with number 10.
Okay, a couple points. Just one real quick point back to Miles Davis. I think the most important thing that's going to happen now is the way Chris Mack reinserts him onto this team. And, again, I've been very happy the way he's handled the whole situation. But this is a situation that I think could have a major impact on this season because this team has won, and they've come together. But now you're bringing in somebody from the outside that half the team knows very, very well, has played with him, probably good friends with him. And some of the newcomers, we got 4 major players that are newcomers in Gaston and Bernard, and then the freshman Gooden and Tariq Jones. You know, how is he going to fit with them? Because he's probably going to take some minutes away from them. So it's going to be interesting to watch how Chris Mack handles this whole situation. I know what's going to happen. The first time he steps on the Cintas floor down at the Cintas Center, he's going to get a standing ovation. Whether he deserves one or not, you know, you can. That remains to be debated. But you know, he's a fan favorite, and he is. What he's going to bring to this team, I think, maybe they've been missing, is leadership. He was the undeniable leader of this team before he was suspended. He has that. Sometimes he plays very, very well. Sometimes he has some off games, but he is not afraid to, make things happen in tough situations. So hopefully that'll be a positive. The other thing I want to talk about is Xavier fans. Look where we are. You know, this has been a long, long journey, 30 years basically when they started this whole process, if not more. And we are now in the number 1 ranked conference in the country, the Big East, and we are competitive in it. I mean, just take a minute and step back and think of where we are. Before we go back, we're going to go through the Big East teams and say a little bit about each. In fact, right now, as of on real-time RPI, it is the number 1 ranked conference. If you know anything about RPI, it's kind of the one that I go to as being the most accurate. And, of course, the NCAA uses it a lot for their seeding and choosing up teams for the NCAA tournament. Villanova right now is number 1 in the RPI. Xavier is 3 in the country. Butler is 6. Creighton is 7. So, you know, again, we started way, way back a long time ago. When I started, we were still playing in the Garden, still in the MCC, and playing, the Evansvilles and St. Francis of Pennsylvanias of the world. And that's one other thing I'd say that Xavier has done right. You know, they have 2 losses this year. You know, last year going into the Big East, they were undefeated. They have 2 losses this year. I feel better about this year because of the schedule they've played. I think they are the most war-ready team to step into those Big East games because there's going to be some big ones day in or every week for the next foreseeable future. All right.
Well, lots of good things for Xavier fans, so let's get to it. Who's number 10?
Number 10 would be St. John's, and I actually started this before they had that big win last night. St. John's, here's my question. St. John's obviously going to be in the Big East, but because they have a presence in New York City. But, they brought in Chris Mullins last year. They fired Steve Lavin, didn't think things were going in a positive direction. He was kind of left with a bare cupboard. He brought in a lot of foreign players last year. In fact, I think last year they had 9 foreigners on their roster. This year they only have 4, so some of those aren't on the team anymore. He has gotten some big recruits. Shamori Ponder is his name, I believe. He's a freshman. He's averaging 17 points. And actually a native Hoosier, Marcus Levet, is from Fort Wayne. We don't need to talk about Fort Wayne today, but he's actually their leading scorer right now as a freshman before last night's game. My question is, Chris Mullins has brought some excitement to St. John's, back to the heyday, probably the best player ever in their history. But my question is, can he coach? Because, they've still struggled even though he's been there. But we'll give him a couple more years, see how things go. And again, big win last night with 33-point win over Syracuse. That surprised me. So maybe he's getting things going in the positive direction here before the Big East begins.
Well, you're right. He's only in his 3rd year, and he unfortunately is the only coach with a losing record, but with quite a resume, so he's got to find some time to get some of those New York boys to join St. John's, which is what made him so strong. So let's move on up the ladder. Who you got at number 9?
Number 9, I put DePaul. Although, they had a 7-4 record in the non-conference. Again, not playing a real challenging schedule, although they had a few teams on there. but they didn't beat any of the teams that would have been big wins for them. They're led by Billy Garrett's been around. He's a senior. I've seen him play a lot in the last 3 years, ever since Xavier's been in the league and playing them home and away. He's kind of their leader. He's averaging 14 points right now. They have another guy, and I actually did get to watch them in the second half against Southeast Missouri State the other night, a game that they came back and won. Eli Kane, I noticed a scorer actually averaging 20 points, and I thought, is this guy a freshman? But I went and checked. He's actually a sophomore who was on the team last year, but it looks like he's having a kind of a breakout year there. Here's the thing that I worry about with DePaul, especially in Xavier's case, is going to All-State Arena, because All-State Arena, I think, seats about 10 or 12,000, and there's usually 1,000 there for DePaul games. And I think that's a trap for a lot of Big East teams, because they are pretty good. They can score a little bit, and you walk in there, and it's just a different atmosphere from going to Madison Square Garden or the Pavilion playing Villanova or the Cintas Center playing Xavier. So my concern about DePaul is that, they can play a little bit, and if, that atmosphere kind of catches you like, hey, we're only playing in front of 1,000 people tonight, what's going on here, that, that could be a trap for not only the Musketeers but any team in the Big East.
Yeah, you're right. The storied program, everybody, I think, wants to see back on it. Of course, Dave Leitao coming back after being away from DePaul for 5 years. Maybe you can get him back to the success he had in the early part of this century. That'll lead us up to number 8, and that's?
Number 8 is going to be Marquette. Steve Wojciechowski, of course, played for Coach K at Duke and actually was an assistant coach at Duke before he came to Marquette. I actually read a story where he might be on the hot seat. I believe this is his third, maybe fourth season, but I think it's his third season, although he was set behind the 8 ball, because when Buzz Williams left there, he left the cupboard really bare, because he had some big recruits coming in, but he took them to Virginia Tech with him. So Steve Wojciechowski, he actually, the first year he brought in a fifth-year player, Matt Carlosino, came from, I think, Arizona. It was one of those first years that you could, be a graduate and go to another school. Brought him in kind of as a short fix, but he was gone after the first year. They also lost that first year a guy who's a big star for Iowa State now, Devontae Burton, who is actually, I think, from the Milwaukee area, but obviously he didn't mesh with Wojo, because he left into his halfway through his freshman year, and now he's lighting it up for the Cyclones out at Iowa State. And then he brought in Henry Ellison last year, but he was a one-and-doner. He helped him last year. So, and then he just lost Tracy Carter, a promising sophomore Philly kid who, had played pretty well last year, but he just left last week. Part of it, I think, is it's hard to recruit, to have kids to want to come and go to school in Milwaukee and play basketball in the winter. I've been to Milwaukee in the winter. It's no fun. So, he's got his work cut out for him. Again, they're kind of shorthanded. Actually, watching them last night, they only, because of the departure of Carter and a couple injuries, they only had 7 scholarship players available to them last night. They were playing a team way below their level and beat them by, I think, 20 or 30 points. But I think they're a little bit thin. But again, and the thing is, everybody's got to go to Milwaukee in the winter too, so that's a tough trip.
Yeah. Yeah, well, again, another storied program, and I think you got to give a guy, turned it around. 20 wins last year. Hard to believe he's on the hot seat. You got to at least let him recruit his own. But big tradition there with Buzz Williams, Tom Crean, Kevin O'Neill, and going all the way back to Al McGuire. So it's not easy. All right, we keep going. Number 7 is going to be
Georgetown, and you know how I feel about Georgetown. We talked about that in our broadcast. The Jekyll and Hyde of the Big East, and they're really a dangerous team because they have, I believe, a lot of talent, and I believe they could beat anybody on their home court, or they could come into any place and win a game on a given day. But again, I think they could lose to anybody on any given day, and they've already proved that with a couple of their losses in the non-conference. Something I was watching the other night, and a guy that stood out Rodney Pryor, and I thought, where did he come from? Thought maybe he was a freshman. I looked it up this morning. He's actually one of those senior transfers. He's a graduate. He played 3 years at Robert Morris and just came in, and he's actually leading them in scoring right now at 20 points. So, again, Georgetown could have a say in who wins it, but I think that say is going to be an upset or two they have of one of the top teams and not them winning.
Yeah, they do. And if anybody, it's hard to say when you're winning 2/3 of your game, but I think anybody in the Big East that might be on the hot seat, it might be JT3. But we'll have to wait and see how things plan out. Keep going. Number 6.
Number 6 is Providence, and if we were picking a surprise team, and I think I did on the Trodcast, it would be Providence because they probably had the biggest losses. They lost Chris Dunn and Ben Bentel to the NBA. And right now they're 10-2, pretty impressive non-conference record for them after those big losses. Thing is, if you look at their resume, the 2 losses, Ohio State and Virginia, those would have been big wins. I don't know if they really have a signature win in the non-conference, but I will say this about Providence. Actually will be the first test for the Muskies on December 28th at the Cintas Center. I believe Ed Cooley does a great job of coaching, and I think he gets the most out of his players. And they're a tough program, and so they're number 6. They're in the middle. I don't see them. They may have a good season and maybe finish 3rd or 4th, but right now I have them at 6.
Yeah, we'll know more with them. Like you say, they come to Xavier and then have to turn right around on New Year's Day and go to Butler. So that's going to tell us a little bit about Ed Cooley's Friars. Okay, who's going to finish off the bottom half?
Number 5, I have Seton Hall. Seton Hall had a big loss. Isaiah Whitehead went to the NBA, but they do have some names that I've remembered in the past. Kadeem Carrington, he's averaging 19 points. Desi Rodriguez, 14 points. Angel Delgado, 14 points. So they have a lot of firepower and some guys who've been tested. And here's what you got to remember about Seton Hall. Again, they did lose Isaiah Whitehead. They've got some other players that are tough. They beat Xavier last year at Seton Hall, but they also beat Villanova during the regular season, and they also beat Villanova at Madison Square Garden in the Big East Finals. They're a dangerous team, and I wouldn't argue too much if somebody went out on a limb and said, "Hey, they could win this," because again, I think they're going to give everybody fits when you go to play on their floor, and again, I think they can go in unfamiliar places and win big games too. They got some power, and again, I'm going to accolades to the coach. Kevin Willard's done a great job there. I think he's a big-time coach.
And that leaves you with among the 4 ranked teams now. We're getting up into there, and where it gets like slivers of difference. So who are you going to put in that number 4 slot?
Well, I think the 2, 3, and 4, there are 3 teams I think that you could move around, and I wouldn't have any trouble with arguing placing any of them at any of those 3 positions. Number 4, I went with Butler. 11-1, and they got a great resume. They beat Arizona, Utah, Vandy, Cincy, and IU just last week. We talked about that on the Trodcast. Well coached. I don't know if they have the athleticism as the 3 teams that I put above them, but again, they're going to play good basketball. They're going to play defense. Playing at Hinkle Fieldhouse, I've been there many times for Xavier games. That's a tough place to play. The Indianapolis fans, of course, they're well educated. They come out and forced to back up the Bulldogs. And I tell you right now, I have a lot of friends in Indianapolis, and none of them went to Butler, but they're all Butler fans. So Butler has actually captured the imagination of Indianapolis. Of course, that's easy to do when you go to the final game 2 years in a row. So that's a tough program, and they're going to be a tough out for anybody that goes into Hinkle. And again, they'll play well on the road.
Yeah, you could probably upset a few people from Indianapolis picking Butler below your hometown Xavier. Butler at 13, Xavier currently at 17. So you got to give it to Chris Holtman. He does have the best record of the coaches in the Big East, albeit with not as long of a record, but he's winning at a 7:05 pace. So we'll see how the Bulldogs go. So who's going to slip into number 3 here?
Well, I'm going to make a comment on what you just said. Nobody from Indianapolis would believe that I would ever put Butler above Xavier. It's kind of a love-hate relationship with them. I was there for the famous game when the clock stopped working and may have cost Xavier a game. And, again, it's kind of a fun back and forth, but I always give the Butler fans a hard time. Number 3, I'm going to put our Muskies. We've already talked about some glaring problems that need to be fixed. Maybe they're headed in a positive direction, the turnovers and the free throws. But, the positive for the Muskies, already talked about this, they've probably played the toughest schedule of anybody in the Big East and may be the most ready for the wars that are going to start next week in the Big East schedule. They can shoot the 3, they can score it, and then the emergence of Rasheed Gaston being able to score underneath when you need to, take it down low when you can't, when the threes aren't falling. I put the Musketeers at number 3, and just I want to qualify Muskie fans. Yes, I want them to win the Big East. I'm just trying to be objective here.
Yeah, it's hard. We probably just got, once we listen to this, we'll have several hits, people tell us, but that's the fun about being a fan. Well, that means your top 2 are going to be the Blue Jays and the Wildcats, and I got a feeling which way you're going to go, but we'll let you tell the folks who falls at number 2 in the Big East for 2017.
Well, actually, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I was watching after the Marquette game last night. I had Fox on, and they were doing a little bit of a quick preview of the Big East, and one of the gentlemen on there actually picked Creighton to win it. Now, I'm going to slide Creighton into the number 2 spot, but here's what I'm going to say about Creighton. Number 1, I think they have an advantage over every team in the Big East, and that's location and their home court. Creighton, and I don't know if you remember one of your trivia questions, it was the 5 toughest places to play in America, and I don't know if you recall, but Creighton was one of those top 5. They have a new place called the Century Link Center. I don't think it's been open maybe 4 or 5 years. They don't lose there. And I think a lot of it is, number 1, they have a great crowd there. Probably not much to do in the wintertime in Omaha, Nebraska, but it's always sold out. It's about a 11,000 seat arena. It's very loud. But then again, that's the longest trip everybody else has to make, to go out to Omaha, Nebraska in the middle of the winter, and I think that gives them a little bit of an advantage in that building anyway. Of course, the flip side of that is Creighton has to make all the trips to the East Coast, so again, it's probably, but I think it's a little bit of an advantage. Maurice Watson, I've talked about him on the Trodcast, and I've seen this kid play for a few years now. He's actually from Philadelphia. He's a Philly kid. He's just tough. He is a true point guard. He doesn't score all the time a lot. He can score. He's averaging 12 points right now a game, but he's also averaging 9 assists. That's a true point guard right there. He makes that team go. And also they had a big pickup of the graduates. He's not actually a graduate. He's actually a true transfer under the normal way, set out a year last year. Marquise Foster, who came from Kansas State, he's actually their leading scorer right now. He's putting up about 19 points a game. And they got a lot of other guys that can shoot the 3. And Greg McDermott, I wasn't too sold on him. I think his deal was he kind of came there when his son played. It was kind of a package deal, one of those, hey, if we give Dad a coaching job here, you'll bring here, because he was a top recruit out of high school. But I'm going to tell you now, his son's been gone for a few years. He's done a great job. They shoot the 3 well. They move the ball well. They got some big wins on their resume already. They beat Wisconsin. They beat North Carolina State. They beat Ole Miss. But again, it happens to everyone. Just last week they played Oral Roberts, which I believe, and you may know better, is I think located in Omaha also. It's a kind of a big rivalry game. And they almost lost that. It was 66-65. That's their closest game, because they are undefeated right now. So I put them at number 2, but again, they're going to be a tough out.
And that leaves you with your number 1, with the nation's number 1, the Villanova Wildcats. What more can we expect for Jay Wright and that group to do?
Yeah, it's not a hard pick to make when you say Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, Chris Jenkins. Hart averaging 20 points right now. We talked about what he did to bring them back against Notre Dame. Jalen Brunson averaging 12 points. Chris Jenkins, 13 points. Chris Jenkins, of course, made the big shot to win the national championship. Jay Wright, maybe best coach in America right now. That's a debate I'm sure people would love to have with me. Throw some other names out. Right now they're hitting 40% from three. They play defense. They went on the road already in the Big Ten Big East Challenge and beat a ranked good Purdue team at Purdue. I just have trouble until somebody beats them taking them off the top spot. Although I think they're probably more vulnerable. Archie Diacono's gone, and he was the heart of that team. He was the one who made sure that when things got tough, he was going to make the big plays, and he was going to will them to win. And maybe Josh Hart did that, and maybe he's the one that's going to take that role. He kind of did that against Notre Dame when they got behind. So we'll see. But, Villanova's I'm going to predict them number one. Again, I hope the Musketeers knock them off that perch, but I'm just being objective right now.
Well, they did beat them when they were number one last year, and the last team to defeat them, I believe, and that'll be interesting to see. We're going to find out very quickly in the Big East season because Nova does have to go to Omaha a week from Saturday on New Year's Eve, and we'll find out who the cock of the walk is then. Of course, they'll have to repay that visit back to Philadelphia later in the year, but very quickly we'll find out who's who in the Big East. Go ahead, Jim.
On that point you just made, the note I have right up here below, I was going to say to the fans, New Year's Eve, of course, there's big football games in late afternoon and the evening. But if you want a whole day of sports, Musketeers play at Georgetown at 11 a.m. because Fox Sports has, I think, a whole day of Big East games. But the game right after the Musketeers is a game that's really going to, be an important game early on, kind of set the tone, is Nova has to go to Omaha to play Creighton at 1 o'clock. So if you want to watch a nice basketball doubleheader, hopefully the Musketeers are 2-0 in the Big East by then, and then we're going to see, who's going to come out of that Nova Creighton at Creighton game. That'll be an exciting game, and I think that'll set the tone for the way we go in the Big East.
And we'll have plenty of time to talk about that in next week's RazorCast before those big games happen. One thing I like about both Nova and Xavier, Jim, is that, every team flips, well, not every team, I should say, but some teams flip a non-conference opponent, and Nova and Xavier don't shy away from the tough ones. Nova's going to play Virginia on January 29th, and Xavier, of course, has its big rivalry game against Cincinnati on January 26th. So that's how you build great programs. Now, anything else on the Big East you want to throw at us?
Well, I do have trivia. I'm sure you expected that. But one other thing I do want to throw out here, I was going to mention this on our broadcast and I forgot. If you're looking for that last-minute Christmas gift for a Xavier fan, there's a book that just came out, and I actually just received my copy. I ordered it from Amazon yesterday, and it's one of those books. I actually bought it for my upcoming trip south vacation for a little reading and some downtime. But it's one of those that I picked up yesterday, and it's almost you can't put it down. It's a great read. It's called Inside the Crosstown Shootout, and it's written by a man named Bill Cook, I believe is the way he pronounces his last name. It's actually Koch. He was a writer for the Post and the Enquirer, sports writer for years, and now he still does some writing, I think, on the Bearcat website. But he wrote this book, the subtitle, The Rivalry That Captivates a City. And I really like what he did with this book. It's not just, the top games or a narrative of the history. He actually went out, and every chapter is an interview with somebody who's had a major playing point in the Crosstown Shootout. He starts out, the first section's all the coaches. And he actually interviewed every coach from 1980 on for both the Musketeers and the Bearcats, except for, of course, Skip Prosser, who's no longer with us. And it has a little chapter on each one. And I'm almost finished with the coaches part of the book. It's just if you live in Cincinnati and the Crosstown Shootout is something that is a major event for you, as it is for me and a lot of Bearcat fans, it is just a great read.
A great book recommendation, and we'll listen for the whole review closer to the shootout. I'm sure you have a chance to talk about it. But there's your last-minute gift-giving guide from Jimmy the Reek. Before you go to your trivia, I do want to apologize. We wished happy birthday on our Tron cast to Coach Jay Wright. It's Christmas Eve birthday, but I added a year, giving him my birthday instead of his. He's just 55. But Jay Wright, happy birthday. Day after tomorrow, 55. So what do you got for me, Stumpy?
Well, one last thing on the book. If you're looking for it, I know it's being sold in the Xavier bookstore on campus and the UC bookstore on their campus. I know it's being sold those two places. And I saw him on one of the talk shows on Sunday night. I can't remember even what channel I was watching. But there's also a bookstore downtown. I can't remember the name of it that is carrying it. Again, I got it off of Amazon. Of course, probably a little late. Although I think actually today was the last day you can order something that they'll get it to you on time for Christmas. But it wouldn't be bad if it came a couple days after Christmas. But a good gift there. All right. Well, we talked about the Big East today, so I did a little research on the Big East, and that's where the trivia is going to come from today. Actually, interesting enough, I learned that the Big East came about because of an NCAA change in late 1970s. They had decided that they were going to give automatic bids to the conference winners. And a lot of these teams that started the Big East weren't in conferences at the time. In fact, I didn't even know this. In the mid to late 70s, what they were doing was they were setting up what they called regions out east. They would put 8 teams in a region that were not in a conference, and they would play a little tournament at the end of the season. And whoever won that region, they actually at one time had 4 regions out east, they would get the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. Of course, at that time, the NCAA tournament was only taking 32 teams. Well, the NCAA came out and said they weren't going to do that anymore, so it kind of precipitated a need for a conference. And, of course, many people know Dave Gavitt is the one who actually was the founder of the Big East. He was actually coaching at Providence at the time. But he was the one that put it together, saying to some of the big teams out in the East, we need to get a conference together so we have at least that automatic bid. So a little history there on that I wasn't aware of, why the Big East came about. I remember when it started, when I was actually in high school when it started, and I remember thinking, wow, that's kind of cool, and I knew they were very successful early on. But here's your question. I'm tough on you sometimes, so I'll give you, this will be kind of easy, some of them, but see how you can go. There were actually 7 original members when the Big East started in 1979. Can you name those 7 original members?
Well, like you said, it was all sort of centered on the East Coast, which is what it wanted to be named for, and they wanted it to be basketball-centric and not football-centric. And some of them are still with us, and some have gone other ways. But the ones that are still around, I believe, are Providence, St. John's, and Georgetown. Of course, they just
those three are correct. You're on a roll here. There were actually 7 founding members, so there's 4 more.
And there's always a big rivalry. They just played last week, another upset for Georgetown when they played Syracuse, which is a little down. That was always a huge rivalry. So there's your number 4.
You're 4 for 4.
And the others, I believe, actually one that's still with them is Seton Hall.
You're correct.
Full time. And
5 for 5.
The Holy Cross team was invited to join it. I know they decided not to.
You are correct on that.
So Connecticut was with it for a long time.
They were a founding member, and the last one's tough.
One was, which precipitated the move to the ACC for football reasons, was Boston College.
Man, you're on your game today. You got all 7 of them. They're very good. Actually, then Villanova joined after the first year in 1980, and Pittsburgh joined in 1982. And you are correct, Boston College was the one that started to say something about football, and then Miami was brought in, and then a lot of other members were brought in and then football, and then that whole thing kind of went bad, and it all split, but it all worked out for the Musketeers because they are now in the Big East. And again, it's I don't think anybody could claim there's another basketball only, or I guess you would call it a non-Division I football conference that's any better in the country. And it's a great fit, of course, for the Musketeers because they don't have football. And the other schools in that league today that do have football play at a lower level than Division I, so the money and the resources aren't spent on the football program like they are some of the other places. Here was one other interesting tidbit I'll throw out there, just kind of surprised me. 7 original members, they only played each other once. And, in fact, the standings at the end of the first year was Syracuse, St. John's, and Georgetown were all 5-1. And then UConn was 3-3, Boston College 2-4, Seton Hall 1-5, and Providence, the founder, was 0-6. But it was well on its way to be one of the super conferences in college basketball.
And some people say may remember the Bearcats were part of that Big East for a few years before they switched over to the American. All right, well, check you all. We all want to wish you a Merry Christmas. Join us on Tuesday for our Trogcast about all things NCAA men's basketball. And, of course, we'll have our Razor cast. Before I turn it back over to Jim to end, I do want to say one end-of-the-year shout-out. A good friend, not basketball related, but the Cincinnati area sporting world will be a lesser place. John Basiliga, my old buddy from Turpin High. I coached with him. I coached against him. On a good friend. He retired this year as the head coach of Northern Kentucky Soccer after 14 seasons and a national championship. Brought Turpin 3 state championships in soccer in 24 years. And that's not bad for a guy who called himself a hockey coach. So, Boomer, we're wishing the best to you and Linda. His daughter, Lindsay, is still coaching at Bowling Green. One of the true characters that you would ever want to run across in coaching. And now back to you to sign us off, Jim.
Yeah, I remember when we started and first met and were coaching, I remember that you had many, many good stories about Coach Basiliga, and I know what he meant to you. Probably you would maybe say one of the most influential people that got you into coaching. I don't want to make that statement for you, but I would guess that he'd be in at least your top 3. So, yeah, I read his bio that they put out because of his retirement from Northern Kentucky, and you talk about an interesting story there. Maybe you should get the movie rights to his life because I think that would make a good movie. He's been a lot of places, coached a lot of things, and had a lot of success and a lot of fun. So, yeah, with that, Jeff, Merry Christmas to everyone. We thought it was going to be kind of a slow broadcast next week for our Trogcast, but a lot of things happen in college basketball last night.
You said that last week. I knew we've got a lot of top 25 matchups as people run into conference play. We'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. So, all right. Again, thanks to Mike Goodpaster and the Grueling Truth for allowing us to do this. Hopefully you are liking this. If you have any Muskie fans that aren't listening to us, clue them in how they can get our podcast, and we'll say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, and we'll see you next week.